if you are doing the actions, but you have the wrong reasons, are you really doing good? No. You have to have both. You you have to, as James says in the letter of James, right? You gotta have both. You've got to do things that are right and good, and you gotta do them for the right reasons. Just doing things for the wrong reasons is, no. So that's what Paul is saying here. We continue in Romans chapter 9, verse 30 through chapter 10, verse 13. What shall we say then? That Gentiles or the nations who did not pursue righteousness have attained it? That is, a righteousness that is by faith. But the Israel who pursued a law that would lead to righteousness did not succeed in reaching that law. Why? Because they did not pursue it by faith, but as if it were based on works. They have stumbled over the stumbling stone, as it is written, Behold, I am laying in Zion a stone of stumbling, and a rock of offense, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Elohim for them is that they may be saved. For I bear them witness that they have a zeal for Elohim, but not according to knowledge, for being ignorant of the righteousness of Elohim and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to Elohim's righteousness. For HaMashiach, the Christ, is the end, or end goal would be the more correct translation. He is the end goal of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. And the word here, believes, another way of saying that whole last verse is, or the end goal of the law, that everyone who believes may be justified. So that's another way of saying it, or made righteous. This word justified means made righteous. So, there's more, and I'm going to get to that. But again, this is a passage, this whole thing is, again, when people say, see, the law has been done away with. Because they say, see, the end of the law. Meaning that if you believe in him, you're no longer following the law. But that is not what the actual language there says. That's a misunderstanding, a mistranslation. For by end, it means the end goal. That's what it means. That's what the original text says. And then, even the start of what I read there, verses 30 and 31 and 32, 33, people like to say, see, that, oh no, it's been done away with, they can't, find righteousness, but that's not at all what he's saying there either. What shall we say then? The Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have attained it, as righteousness as by faith, but that Israel who pursued a law that would lead to righteousness did not succeed in reaching a law. Why? Because they did not pursue it by faith. Now, so he chose to see, so they don't have to do anything physical. And that's not all what Paul is saying. Paul is saying that the works have to come from the faith. That's what Paul says throughout Romans. That's what Paul says throughout all of his writings. It's what James says, that you have to have the right intention, right? The right kavana. You have to have the right mindset and the right reasoning inside for your external, which I just gave the great example with the guy who's only nice to the girl so that, she'll sleep with him. And when she doesn't want to sleep with him, he gets all upset. That's really kind of directly what Paul is saying there. You have to have the right intention. Otherwise, you don't get the righteousness. You're not a good man, right? So, and Paul's saying he sees that his people, instead of, by people, Pharisees, because he was a Pharisee, that, they are claiming to follow God, but they're not following what God actually says. And he wants for them to follow God. He wants them to do what God says, both internally and externally. He makes that really clear in all of his writings. We continue. For Moshe writes about the righteousness that is based on the law, that the person who does the commandments shall live by them. But the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that is, bring Hamashiach down, or who will descend into the abyss, or Sheol, the grave, that is, to bring Hamashiach up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith that we proclaim. Because if you confess with your mouth that Yeshua is the Lord, and believe in your heart that Elohim raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. The scripture says, everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame. For there is no distinction between Jew and Gentile, Greek, Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And, this passage here is one that they say all the time, except for the sheer fact that in how they like to translate this and understand this, totally goes against what Yeshua says in his own gospel, which Yeshua says, not everyone who calls upon me, Lord, Lord, shall be saved. So that's what Yeshua says. So if anyone thinks that you can just call upon him and be saved, if anyone wants to take what we just read here in Romans and misconstrue it to say that, then it's in contradiction with what Yeshua says. Does the Bible contradict itself? No. And that means that, that interpretation of this passage in Romans can't be the proper interpretation, because then it's in disagreement with what Jesus said. So what Paul is saying was the proper interpretation of this passage. What Paul's really saying is he's saying what he's been saying, that you have to actually follow the Almighty, in your heart and in your mind for the right reasons, that you must love him, have faith in him, and do these righteous deeds, have love for God, and want to exalt him by doing his will and not exalt yourself. You have to make him the mighty one and not you. And when you do that, you are loving God with all your words and all your heart and all your soul and all your being. And when you do that, regardless of whether you're a Jew or a Gentile, that means regardless of whether you're born of the seed of Israel or grafted in. And it's Paul who talks about grafting in Romans, just 2 chapters after this one, chapter 9, so chapter 11. It's 3 chapters, chapter 12. I think it's 11, but it is 11. Paul talks about being grafted in, just 2 chapters later. He is saying that, when you're doing these things for the right reasons from the inside, internally, that then, you are saved, because your righteousness is true righteousness. It comes from love of God, and that if you're doing your righteous deeds for things that are unrighteous, as in self-exaltation, well, then are your deeds really righteous at that point? No. That's what Paul is saying here. And we now move on to 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 1 through 13. And I'll go ahead and read this too. So, it is actually, this is Paul's letter to the Corinthians, it is actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and of a kind that is not tolerated even among pagans. For a man has his father's wife, and you are arrogant. Ought you not rather to mourn? Let him who has done this be removed from among you. For though absent in body, I'm present in spirit. And as if present, I've already pronounced judgment on the one who did such a thing. When you are assembled in the name of the Lord Yeshua, and my spirit is present with the power of the Lord Yeshua, you are to deliver this man to Satan, or the accuser, for the destruction of the flesh, so that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. Or some passages say in the day of Jesus. So the different manuscripts, you know. So, you know, that verse, that fifth verse there, that's one that maybe is a bit confusing to people. How can you deliver someone to Satan in order that they may be saved, right? Especially sin for destruction of the flesh. Well, my co-shepherd in this group, Joshua, he actually gives a great commentary on this quite often. And that is Paul's possibly talking about just, you know, go, okay, you know what? Then go ahead, separate from us, continue to live in sin and see where that leads you. And so you condemn this person, tell them that they're sinning, and then they kind of wander off in their sin and realize in your denouncing of them, and then their sin lead them to rock bottom, basically, that they shall come back and be saved. And that's one interpretation of that verse. And that's a mostly accurate interpretation of that verse, you know, that in showing someone the horribleness of their sin and then letting them discover, yeah, they were right to denounce me, that person may in fact end up, you know, saved in the end. Paul continues, your boasting is not good. Yes, he said that in our previous reading in Romans, right? Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? So a little pride, a little sinful pride, you know, fills you with sin. Cleanse out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you really are unleavened. For Hamashiach, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Let us therefore celebrate the festival of Pesach, not with the old leaven, the leaven of malice and evil. And remember, malice, that means the twisting of the word of God and doing the opposite of what it says while thinking that you're actually doing what he says. And you remove that. But with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So, you know, we have to truly follow God and sincerely with love follow God and sincerely with love do acts of loving kindness, of chesed, of mercy on others, not because we want them to praise us, but truly and sincerely because we love them, you know, and because we love God. I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people. Not all mean the sexually immoral of this world, or the greedy and swindlers or idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world. But now I am writing to you not to associate with anyone who bears the name of brother if he is guilty of sexual immorality or greed, or is an idolater, reveler, drunkard, or swindler, not even to eat with such a person. What have I to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church who you are to judge? Elohim judges those outside. Purge the evil person from among you. So, you know, see, Paul's saying a lot of what I was saying earlier, in that if someone's choosing not to follow God, I mean, you know, they're just choosing not to follow him. But if someone is claiming that they're following God while being a hypocrite and wallowing in sin and not following God, or else if they are doing things with the wrong intention, with the wrong heart, with the wrong faith, and you know they're doing it for vainglory, for their own glory, and not for the glory of God, That's when you got, let them know, hey, look, you are being a hypocrite. You know, if you were just some random greedy swindler or idolater who was not claiming to follow God, that would be different, but you are claiming to follow God, well-being, all these things that God says don't do, you know, and so, that's when you go, look, that is wrong, being a hypocrite, Paul's preaching against hypocrisy here, which Yeshua spoke a lot against hypocrisy as well. That's what's being said here. Our next reading is from 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 1 to 11, and that will be read by Amber. Amber, are you still awake?
It is actually reported that there is sexual
Oh,
immorality
hold on.
among.
That's what I just read.
Oh,
Were you gone?
no.
Or it's just in my explanation, you totally lost what I had read. Were you present? Did you hear me? Previous.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
pretty sure I
No,
heard you. I just don't remember it.
that's fine. Yeah, no, it's the next one, 2 Corinthians.
For I made up my mind not to make another painful visit to you. For I cause you pain. Who is there to make me glad but the one whom I have pained? And I wrote as I did so that
Oh,
when I
you
came,
wait,
what?
you dropped out there. The second part of verse 2 was not caught in the recording.
Did I start over?
Uh, just with the second part of verse 2, like, to make me glad, but, you can start there.
I don't know how to do this now. But the one whom I have pained. And I wrote as I did so that when I came I might not offer pain from those who should have made me rejoice. For I felt sure of all of you, that my joy would be the joy of you all. For I wrote to you out of much affliction and anguish of my heart, and with many tears, not to cause you pain, but to let you know the abundant love that I have for you. Now, if anyone has caused pain, he who has caused it not to me, but in some measure not to put it severely to all of you. For such a one, this punishment by the majority is enough, so that so you should rather return to forgive and comfort him, or he may be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. So I beg you to reaffirm your love for him, for this is why I wrote, that I might test you and know whether you are obedient in everything. Anyone whom you forgive, I also forgive. Indeed, what I have forgiven, if I have forgiven anything, has been for your sake in the presence of Hamashiach, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his design.
Thank you. So, this, it'd probably be helpful if we read the chapter before it, 'cause it sounds like there needs to be more context here, right? So, but it seems that uh, Paul is talking about someone and it's the same congregation that we were just reading about in his previous letter. It seems that Paul has been correcting someone and telling someone they're wrong. Maybe that same person we just read about, and um, that this has caused great pain and strife, and that now Paul is talking about how the people need to come to this person, be it the same person or a different person, I don't know, and they need to tell this person, look, you've hurt us, you've caused us great pain by what you've done, and we love you, and we're very sad about your actions. Your actions have been harmful to all of us, and that in showing deep sorrow and love towards this disobedient person and showing great forgiveness, that then this person may return to the flock. So, I mean, this is kind of talking about, the other end of that spectrum of what we were just talking about. Of, you tell this person, look, you've been doing wrong. You're a hypocrite. And then, let them hit rock bottom. But then when they hit rock bottom and when they come back, don't be mean to them. Don't be cruel to them. Don't cast them off. But, accept them like how the father did the prodigal son, right? So, we love you and we're sorry that this has happened to you and we forgive you. And, because if you cast someone out permanently, even after they've tried to change, then you're giving in to Satan. You're being outweighed by the accuser. Because he just said in the previous reading, turn them over to the accuser. But then you're being outweighed by the accuser if you don't accept them back and let them fall away, even when they have a contrite heart and want to return. Accept the return. So if he's talking about the same person, that seems to be what he's talking about. If he's not talking about the same person, that still seems to be what he's talking about. So I'm going to guess that's what he's talking about. The really, I mean, more context would really be needed. So now for the final reading, which is Galatians chapter 3, verses 10 through 14. For all who rely on works of the law are under a curse, for it is written, cursed be everyone who does not abide by all things written in the book of the law and do them. Now it is evident that no one is justified before Elohim by the law, for the righteous shall live by faith. Or else that is also translated as, or the one who by faith is righteous will live. But the law is not of faith, rather, the one who does them shall live by them. HaMashiach redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree, or on a cross, so that in Yeshua HaMashiach the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles or the nation, so that we might receive the promised Spirit, or another way to translate is receive the Spirit of the promise of the Spirit through faith. So this section in Galatians is another one that people will say, see, the law's been done away with. But we already know from the other writings of Paul that we've read in previous week and from Yeshua that the law cannot be done away with, that it is eternal, that is forever, and that we're not to abandon it. Paul in Romans says, are we therefore to abandon the law? By no means. We're to fulfill it. So we already know, since the Bible doesn't contradict itself, that Paul can't be talking about doing away with the law. That's not what he's talking about. Again, what Paul is saying is that, and this is so clear in his rhymes and in other rhymes as well, and that is that if you follow the law, you get the blessing. If you don't follow the law, you get the curse. Everyone who is under the law, if they don't follow the law, gets the curse. Now, if, and so what he's saying is, for all who rely on works of the law are under a curse, for it is written, cursed be everyone who does not abide by all things written in the book of the law and do them. So yes, and that is what it said. It says that if you don't follow them, you shall be cursed. Paul's speaking an absolute truth there, right? So if we are, which we're all under the law, but then if we, choose not to follow it, we shall indeed be cursed. And that is what he's saying there. We shall all be cursed if we don't follow it, right? Yes, that's what it says. And that's what he's saying. Now it is evident that no one is justified before Elohim by the law, for the righteousness shall live by faith. So again, it's saying if you're just doing the physical deeds, you're not justified. You gotta have the right intention, the right kavana, and that is saying that modern day Judaism also agrees with Paul on. That you have to have the right intention. You do the right thing with the wrong intention, it's as if you never did the right thing. That is modern day teaching of Chabad, which is a standard, regular, non-messianic Jewish group. Paul's teaching the same as Chabad here. So funny, people think he's teaching the opposite. No, teaching the exact same. He then continues, but the law is not of faith, rather, the one who does them shall live by them. So that's right there, Paul's saying, you can't just claim it, you gotta also do it too. Mashiach redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. So, again, by living the law, fulfilling the law, and dying for our sins, he has redeemed us from the curse of it, for he has shown us how to follow it, and how to follow it with the right intention, with the right insight. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree. Which Yeshua was hanged on a tree. So that in Yeshua, the blessing of Abraham might come to the nations, or the Gentiles, so that we might receive the promised Spirit through faith. So by faithfully trusting God and following God completely, we may receive the promises of the Spirit, of the Ruach, that we may gain that wisdom and have the teachings written on our hearts. That's what Paul's saying there. So that is the end of today's readings. Had a lot to cover today, and a lot of hard stuff. I mean, if after all that I've said, if you're saying I don't believe him, mean me, and if you say I think he's interpreting things wrong, I understand that. Paul's really hard to understand. So if you think that I haven't explained Paul in enough detail to back up what I've said, I understand. I doubt that I've explained it in enough detail myself. I wish I was better at explaining it, and I apologize for my lack thereof, for my failings in explaining Paul to the best. I've explained to the best of my current abilities at this exact moment in time, at this night. But I understand that, if I've not explained it to an amount that feels adequate to you, I accept that. I'm not perfect. By far. But I'm far, far from perfect. So, I understand that, and it's okay. Um, it sometimes it takes us a while to understand. We understand to the best that we can, and I am capable of making mistakes and misunderstanding myself. So, I want to humbly say that. I wish to apologize for any of my shortcomings, and I hope that the Word of God has been able to shine through to you and that you've been able to understand it. But, things take time. So, in closing, blessed are you, Yahuwah Elohim, King of the universe, who sanctifies us by your commands and has given us your word, your teaching, your Torah, your instruction, and your living word, your path of salvation, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. Yahuwah Elohim, Lord God Almighty Father, I pray that you have allowed us to see your word and to hear your word, to have our hearts and our minds open to your word, and your words written on our hearts, and giving our minds the wisdom to understand your word, and may they be ever before our mind. And give us the ability to live out your word as taught to us through your Son, our good shepherd, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. And for all you listening, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May his countenance be turned towards you, and may he grant you peace. In Yeshua HaMashiach, Prince of Peace. Amen. You may end the recording, Amber. You may end the recording.